He missed every Christmas for 20 years. Then his son gave him this gift. There was always one chair left empty on Christmas morning, even when no one said anything about it. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe if you love meaningful stories, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I really enjoy seeing where these stories travel. When he was little, his son used to ask why the chair stayed that way, why the gifts from Dad showed up in the mail, but the man himself never walked through the front door. His mother would say something simple. "He's working. He wishes he could be here. He loves you very much." And for a while that was enough. The boy would open the box his father sent, always wrapped with care, always with a card that said the same two things. "I'm proud of you," and "I wish I could be there." There were toys some years, books in others, a baseball glove, a Lego set. Once, a photo of his father in uniform, standing near a tree somewhere overseas. On the back it said, "Merry Christmas from far away." The boy would look at it and smile, then go back to the rest of the day. There were grandparents around, cousins, laughter, food on the table and presents under the tree. But the chair stayed empty. Every year. He stopped asking after a while, stopped wondering when it would change, stopped waiting for the front door to open and stayed focused on what was in front of him. The man missed his son's first Christmas, then his second, then his third. Before he knew it, he had missed 10 of them, then 15, then 20. He didn't mean for it to be that way. He told himself it was duty, that it was important, that his absence had a reason. But still, every time December rolled around, there was a weight in his chest he couldn't shake. He would call on the 24th or 25th, depending on time zones. Sometimes he caught his son in the middle of unwrapping presents. Other times it went to voicemail. The conversations were short. He would say how proud he was, how much he missed him, how he couldn't wait to see him again soon. Soon turned into later. Later turned into next year. And the years kept moving forward. The house changed. The pictures on the fridge changed. But that chair, that one chair, never got used. His son grew up with a quiet understanding. He didn't complain. He didn't hold grudges. But he learned not to count on things he couldn't touch. His father's voice on the phone was familiar. His handwriting on a card was recognizable. But those things didn't take the place of being there. And eventually, Christmas just became something they spent apart. By the time his son turned 30, the two of them hadn't been in the same room on December 25th since the boy was barely out of diapers. They had talked, shared quick updates, and sent gifts across the country. But they hadn't opened a single present together. Not one. No hot cocoa by the fireplace, no passing of plates at the dinner table, no photos in front of a tree. Just years of distance and best intentions. And still, the old man never stopped thinking about it. Every time he wrapped another box and wrote his name on the tag, he wondered if his son still cared, if the gifts mattered, if the cards were read. He didn't expect to be forgiven. He didn't expect to make up for lost time. But there was a part of him, small and quiet, that still hoped. That maybe one day there wouldn't be an empty chair. Maybe one day there would be room again. For something that had gone quiet for too long. The uniform had always come first, and he never once questioned it, until the years started slipping by faster than he could count. He had enlisted young, barely out of high school, eager to prove something, willing to go wherever he was told. The discipline, the structure, the purpose, it gave his life shape. He believed in it. Still did. But the older he got, the more he realized that service came with a cost no one ever explained in the beginning. At first it was small things. Missing birthdays, missing school plays, a lost weekend here, a forgotten phone call there. He'd tell himself he'd make it up next time. But next time never showed up the way he planned. Christmas was the hardest. There were deployments, rotations, emergency assignments. Sometimes he was in the Middle East, sometimes in Europe. Other years, on base halfway across the country. No matter where he was, it always felt like he was a few steps removed from everything that mattered. He remembered calling home one year from a mess hall packed with soldiers trying to do the same. The connection was bad. Static crackled through the line. He could barely hear his son's voice, just enough to make out the words, "I got your card." The boy sounded older than he remembered. Another year, he tried video. The internet cut out halfway through the call. The screen froze on an image of his son holding a box, mid-smile. He stared at that frozen image for longer than he should have, then shut the laptop and sat there, alone, while holiday music played from a speaker in the corner of the room. He didn't blame anyone, not the military, not himself. He had made a choice, a long time ago, and with that choice came distance, came sacrifice. But as the years passed, that distance stopped feeling professional. It stopped feeling necessary. It started feeling personal. He would look at photos sent in the mail, his son in school uniforms, standing by the tree, holding gifts. But he wasn't in any of them. Not once. Not in the background. Not on the edge of the frame. Just missing entirely. And when he did get to visit, it was never during the holidays. Maybe in the spring, maybe over the summer. A weekend here, a few days there. He brought souvenirs, took his son to lunch, asked about school. They would sit across from each other and smile, make small talk, keep things light. But when the visit ended, there was always a moment, quiet, unspoken, when they both realized what had been lost. It wasn't just the missed holidays. It was everything that came with them. The traditions, the inside jokes, the sense of belonging. His son never accused him of anything, never made him feel guilty. But that only made it harder. The silence between them wasn't cold. It was understanding. And that was worse, somehow. One year, he sent a letter instead of calling. He didn't know what else to say. He told his son he was proud of the man he was becoming, that he wished he could be there, that maybe next year would be different. It wasn't. He'd never said the words out loud, but he knew what they were. Regret, quiet, steady, always there. And even though he still wore the uniform, still saluted the flag, still carried the values that had shaped his life, he couldn't ignore what had been left behind. He hadn't been there, not once, and 20 Christmases had come and gone without him. Now his son was grown, living in another state, working, building a life of his own. And somewhere in the back of his mind, the man kept asking himself the same question. Was there still time to come back to something, even after all that time? He didn't realize how many years had passed until he saw the old calendar tucked in the drawer. It was from a box of things he'd packed away when he moved to the smaller house. A simple calendar from a department store, still marked with black pen, circles around Christmas Day for nearly every year between 2001 and 2020. He had marked them even when he knew he wouldn't be there. At first, it was out of hope. Later, it was habit. He sat at the kitchen table, the calendar open in front of him. The dates looked like a list of quiet failures. Each one circled, each one missed. He had sent gifts every year, made the calls, wrote the cards. But it was different when you weren't in the room. He knew that now. You couldn't package presents in a box. You couldn't send your voice through a phone line and expect it to feel like enough. His son had stopped asking him to come home around the time he turned 10. It wasn't cold. It wasn't even sad. Just a quiet shift. No more, "Will you be here this year?" No more hoping out loud. The cards had kept coming, though. His son always wrote back. Every year, a thank you note showed up in his mailbox, polite and thoughtful. Never emotional. Just enough to say, "I got it." Nothing more. As the years passed, the man started sending simpler things. Gift cards, cash in an envelope, a subscription to a magazine. Less personal, but easier. Safer. He told himself that someday they'd talk about it. That someday, when the timing was right, they'd sit down and acknowledge it. How all those holidays passed without sharing a meal or decorating a tree or just being under the same roof. But someday never showed up. And now his son was 30, grown, on his own, doing fine. And the man wasn't sure where he stood in that world anymore. He saw glimpses. A photo texted once in a while. A birthday call. A voicemail left when he forgot time zones. They spoke, but only enough to stay in touch. Not enough to stay close. The last few Christmases had been the same. A package mailed 2 weeks early. A quick call on the day. No resentment. No anger. But also, no presence. It had started to wear on him more lately. Maybe it was age. Maybe it was how quiet the house had become. Or maybe it was because he had finally slowed down long enough to feel it. The absence. Not just of his son, but of the time that had gone with him. He thought about the first year he missed Christmas. His son had been a baby. Too young to know. Too young to miss anyone. He told himself it didn't matter then, but it had started a pattern. 1 year became 2, then 5, then 10. Before he knew it, missing Christmas was no longer the exception. It was who he had become. He wondered what his son remembered. If he ever thought about those mornings. If the gifts had meant anything. If he even kept them. He didn't know the answers. He had never asked. Now, as the end of the year crept closer again, he circled December 25th in the calendar out of habit. But this time, something about it felt heavier. It had been 20 years, and nothing had ever changed. Until, one evening in early December, the phone rang. His son's name lit up the screen. He answered with a quiet hello. There was a pause on the other end. Then came the words he never expected. "Would it be okay if I came to visit this year?" No explanation, no conditions, just that one sentence. He didn't even hesitate. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, that'd be good." He cleaned the house 3 times in the same week, even though it didn't really need it. He wasn't sure what his son would notice or care about, but he did it anyway. Dusted the blinds, vacuumed twice, wiped down the windows, even though they were already clear. He didn't say it out loud, but part of him was nervous. It had been so long since they'd been together for Christmas that he wasn't sure what the right version of the house was supposed to look like. He didn't put up any decorations. There weren't any in the garage anyway. He had stopped pulling them out years ago. There had been a time when his wife hung lights and set out a wreath and played old records on the stereo. But after she passed, and with no one else around, it felt easier to let it all fade into memory. He didn't know what to expect from the visit. His son hadn't said much on the phone, just that he had a few days off and wanted to come by. "No pressure," he had said. "Just figured it's been a while." It had been more than a while. The man checked the guest room 3 times before the day came. Clean sheets, fresh towel on the end of the bed, a lamp that hadn't been used in years. He wasn't sure if his son even drank coffee, but he bought a bag of the same kind he used to like, just in case. He filled the fridge with a few things. Nothing fancy. Sandwich stuff, juice, eggs. He told himself not to expect too much, not to read into it. But he couldn't help the feeling that maybe, just maybe, this could be different. The morning his son arrived, the sky was overcast. The man stood at the front window for longer than he needed to. When the car finally pulled into the driveway, he stepped outside before the engine even shut off. His son got out slowly, carrying a duffel bag and a small box under one arm. They looked at each other for a second. Not uncomfortable, just quiet. "Hey, Dad," his son said. "Hey." They didn't hug. They didn't shake hands. But the space between them didn't feel cold, just cautious. "You hungry?" the man asked. "Yeah," his son said, giving a small nod. They walked into the house, the front door closing behind them with a soft click. Lunch was simple. Sandwiches, a pot of coffee. They talked about work, about traffic, about the weather back home. Nothing deep, nothing heavy. But it wasn't stiff. It was steady. That night, after his son went to bed, the man sat in his recliner and stared at the hallway light, still on outside the guest room. It had been years since anyone had stayed in that room. Years since he'd heard someone else moving around the house after dark. He didn't sleep much, but he didn't mind. The next morning, they had breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, orange juice. His son helped with the dishes without being asked. There was no music, no tree, no lights. But something in the house felt different. Not louder, not brighter, just more alive. The man didn't say much. He didn't bring up the past. He didn't ask why now. He just made space, opened the door, set the chair at the table that hadn't been used in 2 decades. And for the first time in 20 years, the house didn't feel like a place waiting for something that wouldn't come. It felt like someone had finally come back. He found the box in the back of the closet while looking for an old blanket. It was covered in dust, the kind that settles after years without movement. The cardboard was still firm, but the edges had softened, like it had been opened and closed too many times to count. He didn't recognize it at first. Thought maybe it was old paperwork or decorations from years past. But when he lifted the lid, he stopped. Inside were cards. Dozens of them. Some were still in envelopes. Some had stamps. Some were bundled with a rubber band, the paper yellowing around the edges. On top, there was a small plastic ornament wrapped in tissue, red and gold, a name written in black marker on the back. His name. He sat down slowly, the box on his lap. The first card was from 2003. His son had drawn a Christmas tree in green crayon. The writing was uneven, like it had taken real effort just to spell the words. "Miss you, Dad. Merry Christmas." He kept reading. Every year had something. A drawing, a letter, a photo tucked inside. His son's handwriting changed over time, from blocky letters to cleaner cursive, from short sentences to thoughtful notes. Each card was answered. He remembered that. He had written back, sent packages, tried to make the distance feel smaller. But what he hadn't known, what he never saw, was that every card had been saved, collected, held on to. He flipped through one from 2010. A school photo was paperclipped to the inside. His son had braces then. A short message written in pen. "I'm doing good. Mom made the same cookies again this year. She says hi." There was another card from the year his wife passed. No photo, no drawing, just 3 words. "I miss you." He didn't move for a long time. The room was quiet. The house was quiet. He looked through the rest, one by one, quietly. Every Christmas he had missed was in that box. He felt the weight of it, not just the paper, Not just the years, but the effort, the time, the decision to hold on. When he heard footsteps in the hallway, he gently closed the lid and set the box beside him. His son walked into the room, rubbing the back of his neck. "Hey," he said. "Hey," the man replied. His son noticed the box, looked at it, then looked at him. "You found it. You kept all of them," the man said, voice low. His son nodded once. "Yeah." The silence that followed wasn't tense, just full. "You don't have to explain," the son said. "I just couldn't throw them away. Didn't know what else to do." The man nodded, looking down at the box again. "I didn't think they mattered that much," he said. "They did," his son replied, "even when I didn't say it. They didn't hug, didn't cry, but something shifted in that moment. Something honest settled between them." The man placed the box back on the floor, beside the chair. "You want to help me put up a tree?" his son asked after a pause. The man blinked, looked over. "I haven't had a tree in a long time." His son shrugged. "Could be a small one." He thought about it for a second, then stood slowly. "Yeah," he said. "Let's go find one." And they walked out the front door together. They didn't say much on the drive to the store. The roads were quiet. A light mist had started falling, the kind that didn't soak your coat but clung to the air just enough to feel. His son kept his hands on the wheel, eyes forward, the radio low. The man sat in the passenger seat, glancing out the window, watching neighborhoods roll by, roofs lined with lights, windows glowing with the kind of warmth he hadn't brought into his own house in a long time. When they pulled into the lot, it wasn't crowded, just a few cars. A small tent had been set up outside. Rows of trees leaned against one another, their branches tied up in twine. The man stepped out of the truck and adjusted his coat. It had been years since he stood in a place like this. His son walked ahead a few steps, then stopped and looked back. "Big one or small one?" he asked. The man gave a quiet smile. "Small." They walked the rows together, hands tucked into their pockets. No rush, just looking. A woman behind a folding table gave them a nod. "Let me know if you need help." They picked one without much discussion. Not too tall, not too wide. A tree that would fit in the corner of the living room without demanding too much attention. His son carried it to the truck bed while the man paid in cash. He didn't ask what kind it was. It didn't matter. When they got home, they set it up in the living room. The man stood by the wall while his son adjusted the stand, tightened the screws, and made sure it was straight. It leaned a little, but it stood. They sat on the couch for a while after that, both of them looking at the tree. No lights yet, no ornaments, just green branches and the smell of pine slowly filling the room. His son leaned back. "We'll grab lights tomorrow," he said. The man nodded. "Haven't had that smell in this house for a long time." His son didn't respond right away. He just looked at the tree and let the moment settle. "I didn't expect to feel anything," the man added after a while. "I thought maybe it was too late for this." His son turned to him. "It's not." They sat there in the soft quiet of the room. No distractions. Just the tree, the ticking of a clock in the hallway, and the space between them. Less now than it used to be. Later that evening, while his son was in the other room, the man went into the closet and pulled the box of cards back out. He sat down with it on the couch, opened it carefully, and took out the oldest one, the green crayon. The tree drawn in uneven lines, his name written at the bottom in a child's hand. He placed it gently on the small table beside the tree. Just that one. No explanation. No need. When his son walked back in and saw it, he didn't ask. He didn't need to. He just looked at his father and gave a small nod. The tree wasn't decorated yet. There were no lights, no gifts underneath. But something had changed. The room wasn't quiet in the way it used to be. It wasn't filled with regret. It wasn't weighed down by what had been missed. Now it felt like a start. Simple, honest. And for the first time in 20 years, Christmas was starting to feel like something they were both part of. The lights were simple. Just a single strand, warm white, nothing blinking or colorful. His son had picked them up the next morning, along with a small box of ornaments. Nothing fancy. A few red balls, some gold stars, 1 or 2 silver bells. He brought them in with a grocery bag tucked under his arm. Sandwich bread, a couple apples, the lights. They didn't talk much while setting it all up. The man stood by the tree and handed things over. His son climbed the small step stool and looped the lights around slowly, making sure they didn't bunch up. It didn't take long. The tree was small. When it was done, they plugged it in. The soft glow filled the room. The man didn't say anything. He just stood there and looked at it for a while. His son stepped back, brushing his hands on his jeans. "It's not much," he said. "It's enough," the man replied. There was a stillness that followed, but it wasn't empty. It was quiet in a good way, like the kind of quiet that settles when you don't need to speak. They ate dinner together that night in the kitchen. Simple food. Nothing special. Afterward, they moved back to the living room, sat down near the tree, and turned off the overhead light. The glow was soft, steady. His son reached into his bag and pulled out a wrapped box. He didn't hand it over right away, just held it in his lap for a few seconds, then placed it on the table between them. "You can open it now," he said. The man looked at it, then at him. "It's not Christmas yet." "I know," his son said, "but this one's different." The man picked it up carefully. The wrapping was neat, plain brown paper, a single piece of twine tied in a bow. He opened it slowly, folding the paper back one corner at a time. Inside was a photo album, black leather cover, nothing written on the front, just clean and simple. He opened the first page. A picture of his son at 3 years old, sitting by a tree, holding a toy truck. The second page. Another photo. This time at age 5. Holding a card in front of the camera, his handwriting crooked but proud. Every page had a date. Every photo was from Christmas. Pictures his son had saved, gathered, printed. Some were scanned from old photos. Others looked like they had been pulled from digital albums. A few were faded, with soft edges. But all of them had something in common. His son. A Christmas tree. And no father in the frame. The man kept flipping. 10 pages in, he stopped. There was a space. An empty page. At the bottom, written in small, careful letters, was the date. This year. He stared at it for a long time. His son didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The meaning was clear. 20 years of Christmases without him. All captured. All remembered. Not with bitterness. Not with anger. But with truth. And now, one space left open. Not for regret. But for the first one they would share. The man closed the album gently and set it back on the table. He didn't speak for a while. When he did, his voice was quiet. "Thank you." His son nodded. "Next year," the man said, "if you want to come again, I'd like that." His son smiled. "I'd like that too." The tree kept glowing. The room stayed warm. And for the first time in 2 decades, he didn't feel like a man watching Christmas from the outside. He was sitting in it, right where he needed to be. The photo was taken without much thought. Just a quiet moment, a hand reaching for the camera, and a simple, steady click. It happened late in the afternoon on Christmas Eve. The tree lights were on. The sun outside had started to dip low, casting a soft, gray light through the window. They had both been sitting in the living room, the album open between them, neither of them saying much. His son had reached over, picked up his phone, and turned it toward them. "Let's take one," he said. The man raised an eyebrow. "Of us?" His son gave a small nod. "Yeah." He didn't object, didn't shift or adjust his shirt or ask how he looked. He just sat there, one hand resting on his knee, the other on the armrest, and looked forward. Click. That was it. The photo wasn't posed, wasn't planned. But when his son turned the screen to show him, the man just looked at it for a few seconds, then gave a slow nod. "It's a good one," he said. They didn't do gifts that night. There was no big meal, no stockings, just a quiet dinner and a movie neither of them really watched. The house stayed still, and for once, the stillness didn't carry the usual weight. It felt full, steady. Later that night, while his son was in the other room, the man walked over to the tree. He looked at the photo album still sitting on the table. Then he looked at the tree, the lights casting shadows on the wall. He reached into the small box of ornaments and pulled out a red ribbon. It had been at the bottom, unused. Nothing special about it. He took the photo his son had printed and slipped it into a clear plastic frame. Then he tied the ribbon through the hook and hung it on the tree. It wasn't centered. It wasn't at the top. Just somewhere in the middle, tucked between two branches. He stepped back, looked at it, and nodded once. The next morning, he woke early. The house was still quiet. His son was still asleep in the guest room. The man put on a pot of coffee, then sat in his chair by the window. The tree was still lit from the night before. He looked at it the way someone looks at something they didn't know they'd missed. Not because of the decorations, not because of the lights, but because it was there. Because this time, he was here for it. When his son walked into the room a little while later, hair still messy from sleep, he didn't say anything at first. He just looked at the tree. Then he saw the photo, the ornament hanging near the middle. He gave a small smile. "You put it on the tree," he said. The man nodded. "Figured it belonged there." His son walked over, looked at it more closely. "It's the first one," he said, "of both of us." The man didn't respond right away. Then he said, "It won't be the last." They sat at the table again that morning. Coffee, toast, quiet. And when the man looked across the room and saw the tree, this simple, small tree with just a few ornaments and a photo tucked in the middle, he didn't think about the 20 Christmases he had missed. He thought about the one he was in. And for the first time, that was enough. He didn't want the tree to come down right away. Usually the day after Christmas was quiet. A return to normal. Decorations boxed up. The lights unplugged. The house settling back into its usual stillness. But this time, he left the tree up. Not because it was tradition. He hadn't had a tradition in years. He just wasn't ready to let it go. His son stayed one more night. They didn't talk about when he'd leave. It was understood. The world didn't stop just because something good had happened, but neither of them rushed it. That morning, they sat near the window with 2 cups of coffee. It had snowed overnight, just a dusting. The front yard looked soft and untouched. The neighborhood was still asleep. It felt like everything had slowed down just enough to notice it. The man looked over at the photo on the tree, the one they had taken, the one with no poses, no second try, just a moment captured without effort. He didn't say anything, but he kept looking at it. His son noticed. "You can keep that one," he said. "I've got it saved too." The man nodded. "I think I will." They talked a little more over breakfast. Nothing heavy, just small things. Work, weather, an old neighbor who used to live down the street. The kind of conversation that doesn't carry weight, but still matters. When it was time for his son to leave, they both stood at the front door for a minute. The duffel bag was already packed. The car was warming up in the driveway. His son looked at him, then down at the floor, then back again. "I'm glad I came," he said. "Me too," the man replied. It wasn't dramatic. No speech, no big emotion. Just a steady kind of truth between two people who hadn't shared the same space on Christmas for 20 years. "I'll see you soon," his son said. "Yeah," the man said. "I hope so." They didn't hug, but they shook hands. Firm, quiet, honest. And when his son pulled out of the driveway, the man stood at the window, watching until the car turned the corner and disappeared from view. The house went still again, but it didn't feel empty. He walked back into the living room and sat in his chair. The tree was still on. The album was still on the table, and the photo still hung from the branch, just where he had placed it. He thought about the years he had missed. He knew they couldn't be replaced. Time doesn't do that. But something had started to take their place, not as a substitute, but as a beginning. The quiet wasn't the same anymore. It didn't press down on him the way it used to. It didn't fill the room with questions. It just existed, alongside the warmth of what had finally returned. Presence. Real presence. No phone call, no mailed package, just sitting across from someone who had waited long enough. Just being in the room when it mattered. Later that afternoon, he picked up a pen and opened the new calendar he had bought the week before. He flipped to December, found the 25th, and without thinking, he circled it. Not as a promise, not as a plan, just a quiet reminder that this time he had been there. And now, the door was open for what could come next. Not perfect, not polished, but real. And that, after everything, was the gift he hadn't expected to receive, or to give. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy meaningful stories like this, we'd love to have you as a subscriber.